First of all, I want to welcome everyone to Getting Back to Business, which was formerly called Building Boom. And we actually struggled quite a bit with coming up with a name for this year's event, not being sure where we were going to be at any given moment during what has been one of the most challenging times for all of us during the past few months. Our goal today is to present a number of diverse voices from all walks of the San Francisco real estate industry to give insights on how we can best, as a united community, lead the economy back out of this COVID recession. Before we get started, I want to thank our Education and Events Committee and chairs, Juliet Vo and Patrick Gardner, for putting all of this together, as well as all the wonderful programs that they have produced for us during the past few months. I know that many of you have attended these and they've been just great. In addition to myself, Juliet and Patrick, your moderators today are 2019 SFAR President Nina Dosanjh and 2020 President-elect Dan Hershkovitz. In just a moment, we'll begin today's program with our honored guest, Mayor London Breed, who will give us an update on where we are in regards to getting back to work smartly and safely. We want to thank her for all her efforts to keep our city on the forefront of safety during this time. Our Government Affairs Director, Deputy Director Jay CHENG, will give us a brief update before the mayor's comments. Then Patrick CARLISLE will give us an update on the San Francisco local market trends and analysis. Paul ZEGER will then update us on disruption and market trends in new construction. Ashley Song and Carlos Serrano Kwan will talk about the new commercial real estate realities. And last, but by no means least, Brad Inman will talk about staying connected, relevant, and empowered with clients. Each of our speakers will have their own question and answer period after their presentation, and your participation is welcome by using the Q&A box. So please post any questions for the speakers in the Q&A box. Now I'd like to turn it over to SFAR Government Affairs Deputy Director, Jay CHENG.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to see everybody out here in Zoom webinar land. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jay CHENG. I'm your Deputy Government Affairs Director for the San Francisco Association of Realtors. My job is to do politics so you can do your business. My goal is to create a good legislative and political environment for you to buy and sell homes. I want to talk first about the thing that's on everyone's mind, shelter in place, and when we can do open houses again. The mayor's office and Department of Public Health has been very explicit that their target date for open houses with appointments is July 13th. I say this with two caveats. The first caveat is that open houses with appointments are not currently allowed. And that's an important thing to remember for all of us, that open houses with appointments are not currently allowed. But we're shooting for the July 13th target date. I think you've seen Mayor London Breed announce other industries such as hair salons and barbershops and outdoor swimming open up on June 29th. So we see the reopening of the economy move forward in a positive direction. I have good news and bad news on this situation. The bad news is that no, we do not yet have regulations on what open houses with appointments look like. We don't have that information to provide for you today. The good news is one of the reasons we don't have that is because we are actively working with the Department of Public Health on developing those regulations to make sure that they are realistic, they are practical, they are safe, and they are healthy. And so we are taking all your input, and I know many of you have been sending me a lot of input about what you think open houses with appointments should look like. We're taking all of that input and collaborating with the Department of Public Health to put something that's actually realistic for our industry. And so we appreciate your patience, we appreciate your cooperation. Most importantly, we appreciate your feedback in helping us build these regulations together. A top priority for government affairs from the very beginning of this pandemic has been to make sure that real estate has remained an essential business and that we have been able to continue real estate transactions, even if we cannot do those things in person. We know that your business is not the kind of business that can stop on a dime, that it takes a lot of work to build up a farm of folks, a roster of clients, trust with the community. And so we didn't want you to have to be forced to stop everything and then restart everything. We want to try and make sure there are ways to allow you to adapt to this future workforce. And so we're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to advocate for the real estate industry through this very difficult time and try and keep you up to date and educated about the different regulations and the different compliance pieces that we have to make sure we're following to stay safe and healthy and prevent any kind of second outbreak or increase in infections. Before the mayor gets here, I want to talk very quickly about some state legislation, some local legislation that we're addressing. On the state legislation, you've probably heard of two pieces of legislation. SB 939 from State Senator Scott Wiener is the first one we'll talk about. SB 939, the most popular thing that, or not popular, the most visible piece of that legislation was the ability for commercial tenants to walk away from their leases with no impact. I think we can all agree it's a really difficult time for small businesses, especially those with storefronts. It's a really difficult time for all of us. However, the association felt that allowing tenants to simply just walk away from their leases was too dramatic of an impact, because after all, property owners can't walk away from their mortgages. People can't walk away from their buildings. And this is important to keep the landlord-tenant relationship in balance. And so we did oppose SB 939, and I know a lot of you worked together to oppose SB 939, and it did die in the Senate Appropriations Committee past 2 weeks. So thank you so much for your advocacy. We're going to continue working with Senator Scott Wiener, who is a friend of our industry, on how we continue to balance the tenant and landlord relationship and make sure that small businesses have the resources to survive this very difficult time. The second piece of legislation that we worked on was David Chu's bill, which would have negated the mortgage interest deduction for second homes and reduced the mortgage interest deduction for primary homes worth over $500,000. Since we're in San Francisco, we know that all homes are valued over $500,000. And what we communicated with Assemblymember Chu is that this is just the wrong time to take away a tax deduction from our families and our homeowners. This year, out of all years, is not the year where we can increase taxes on people and expect to have a good result. He was receptive to that message. He still moved forward the legislation, but we were able to block it on the assembly floor. And so thank you again for all your mobilization on that effort. I want to talk about two pieces of legislation on the local front that are really that are very impactful to us. The first one is that you've probably heard about a series of eviction moratoriums around COVID-19 and tenants back rent. The first one is Mayor London Breed's eviction moratorium on COVID-19 back rent. I think Mayor London Breed at the beginning of this pandemic recognized that some tenants are going to lose their jobs and have a really difficult time paying that back rent to their property owners. She put together an eviction moratorium which said that you could not evict someone for not paying their back rent during the state of emergency. I think we all have a lot of feelings around that issue. However, we will say that Mayor London Breed put together a really balanced eviction moratorium. There are a couple of things that are really important. First of all, it does not extend indefinitely. It has to be renewed every 30 to 60 days and allows us to kind of evaluate the unemployment rate and where the economy is and whether this is still an appropriate piece of legislation to have in effect. Second, it put a really high document threshold on the tenant. The tenant had to show that they actually lost income from COVID-19. They had to show that they did not have savings or not a second home in Napa that they could go to. And so that higher threshold is really important in making sure that it was a fair and balanced piece of legislation. Most importantly though, the eviction moratorium says that tenants eventually do have to pay the back rent to the property owner. And that's really important because again, property owners can't walk away from their mortgages. And so there's a balance here that we have to ensure. And so this kept that relationship in place. We appreciate that. Supervisor Dean Preston took that piece of legislation 8 steps farther and last week passed his permanent eviction ban on COVID-19. His legislation does a couple of things. One, it extends indefinitely and says that if a tenant hasn't paid the back rent during the COVID-19 state of emergency, they will really no recourse or obligation to pay you going forward. There's very little that you can do about that going forward. Second, it had a very low document threshold. If the tenant goes into court and asserts that they can't pay their back rent due to COVID-19, but produces no documentation or obligation around that, the court is mandated to accept their word for it. And third, and most importantly, it says that the landlord will never be able to evict the tenant for not paying their back rent from COVID-19, giving landlords very few recourses to collect the money that they need to collect in order to continue to pay their mortgages, in order to continue to pay mortgages, to continue to meet their obligations to the city and county. So those are the pieces of legislation that we have in front of us today. I want to open it up, give a chance for question and answer. If folks have any questions around current legislation that we can help address, please feel free to use the Q&A box right now, and I'm happy to take any questions. I see we have a question from Riza about the residential rent moratorium ending in June or July. Currently, the latest date is the end of June. And so the mayor has an option to renew at the end of June to extend it for July. I'll give a second to see if there are any other questions left. While there are questions, we're waiting for questions to come in, I do want to talk a little bit about the November 2020 election. Obviously, the November 2020 election is going to be a major election for several reasons, both nationally, but also locally. We have several supervisor elections up for contention, including in the Richmond district, in West Portal and Forest Hill, in the Haight-Ashbury area, in the Western Addition, and in North Beach. We encourage you to really think about those supervisor elections, to really research. The Board of Supervisors is becoming more and more influential by the day in crafting and shaping legislation. I think this mayor will tell you that if she does not have a working coalition at the Board of Supervisors that she can kind of work with and deal with, then we have no recourse to block really outrageous legislation from being passed. And so there are supervisor elections coming up. We really encourage you to take a look at them to support candidates. We'll be releasing a voter guide later this year to help guide you through those pieces of to guide you through those endorsements as they come up. For Cece has a great question around the Preston legislation. It is no longer under consideration. It did pass this past week. And so that legislation did pass this past week. We are actually looking to file a lawsuit on that piece of legislation, and we're looking for plaintiffs. And so if you're interested in being a plaintiff around that legislation, please let us know. And that answers Claudia's question. What can we do to fight Dean Preston's bill? Again, we are looking for plaintiffs. So if you have a property owner or a client that you know would be interested in getting involved on this, please connect them with us. Please connect them with me, and we'll get them involved. Thank you, Derek, for looking to SFAR for our election recommendations. We really appreciate it. We can't tell you. We did a survey several years ago about our members and who lived in San Francisco and who was registered to vote in San Francisco. It's so important to register to vote and have that voice be heard. But even more importantly, it's important for you to pass those election recommendations on to your clients. And so it's really through our clients and our homeowner network that we really gain strength. Any updates on when City Hall will open? This is from Christine, in particular the recording office, the tax collector, DBI, and tax recording offices. That's a great question. We just reached out to Assessor Recorder Carmen Chu this past week. They are building out their reopening plan, but they do not have a firm date yet. A lot of this depends on the Department of Public Health and the public health officer giving them the okay. And we do not have that. They do not have that okay yet. But Assessor Recorder Carmen Chu is excited to open, and she's building out her timeline to make sure that the moment the date is set, that she can reopen. So just to wrap up, I did see some Q&A come in. I want to address those very quickly. First by saying my email, we'll type it out in the answer box, but it is jay@sfrealtors.com. That's jay@sfrealtors.com. If you do have questions for the mayor, as she mentioned, we are happy to pass that along to her and get answers to your staff. We had a very quick question around when offices can open. Offices are actually already allowed to reopen right now with under very strict guidelines, and I will type out that link in the box. And also, the state of emergency is still ongoing, and shelter in place is still on. There is no specified end date of that. I do want to specify that shelter in place is different than the state of emergency. The shelter in place is the health order that we're under right now. The state of emergency is just a legal document that the city is using to get funds back from FEMA and the federal government. So those are kind of two distinct pieces that I want to extrapolate. I know there are a bunch of other questions here. I will tackle them in the Q&A by sending my email out. I want to pass it off to Mark so we can continue off the program. I want to bring it back to Mark, our SFAR president. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you to Mayor Breed. That was fantastic, and we applaud all of her efforts. And Jay, I have to give a shout out to Jay Cheng and just say what an amazing job that you are doing as SFAR, Government Affairs Deputy Director. We could not do what we do without you. So quickly, I'm going to pass this along to your 2020 President-elect, Dan Hershkovitz.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to be a part of this yet again. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome and introduce an icon in San Francisco real estate, and also a colleague and co-worker. Since 1989, Patrick Carlisle has worked in Bay Area real estate as an agent, a sales manager, a director of training, and chief market analyst at Pacific Union, Paragon, and now for Compass. Patrick Carlisle is famous for his market reports, so much so that agents across the Bay Area have a special email folder that they often title the Carlisle Report or the Patrick File, or sometimes just Patrick. And that's where they squirrel away his timely market reports like little gems. And they call upon their precious treasures when they sit with their clients, with their sellers, working out comps and selecting a list price or a pricing strategy, or sitting with their buyers and trying to determine the value of the home. Patrick and his famous market reports have been quoted in local, national, and international media over 2,000 times. I now welcome Patrick Carlisle, who will help us make sense of these interesting times. Welcome, Patrick, and thank you.
Thank you, Dan. My guess is that most of the people have a special file for my stuff. It's called the trash file. Anyway, so I have never seen a weirder or more schizophrenic combination of economic circumstances than we have today. On one end, we have people suffering, of course, from a terrible, often from a terrible disease and a terrible financial situation. Unemployment is unbelievable. And then if you go to the other far end of the spectrum, it seems like its happy days are here again, such as at the stock market. And real estate is someplace in between. Quite honestly, I've been very surprised at the size of the rebound that we've had here in the Bay Area, and the quantity of buyer demand that has jumped back into the market. Okay, let's jump into some of these slides, and I'll try and go over them relatively quickly. Next, please. Okay, so this first slide is a week old, but the trend has continued for the last week as well. And we see the terrible crash that occurred when shelter in place first occurred, and then the enormous rebound that has happened since. And as I said, that rebound is continuing. Okay, next. So here's another look at the decline and rebound. I think one of the most interesting, this is for houses in particular in San Francisco. The house market has rebounded more strongly than the condo market, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But one of the most interesting things that has happened, and it's not just in San Francisco, in fact, it's happened in every major market of the Bay Area, is that with shelter in place, the higher price or highest price home segment saw the deepest crash. As you can see here in March, we're actually running above 2019. That's the green line, 6% above last year. Then it crashed 78% from last year in April, and then it jumped back up basically to where we were last year at 98%. Biggest crash and then biggest rebound. A very interesting dynamic in that the people who are jumping back in most dramatically are those people with the most money to spend. And we'll see that that's had some interesting effects on median sales prices as well. Next. Okay, so here I compared the percentage of listings accepting offers, and the black line is for houses, and the gold line is for condos and co-ops. And so, you know, this percentage is subject to seasonality. So it's typically, if going back to the beginning of the chart, it's strongest in spring, then the market slows down in summer, it springs back in autumn, it goes down to plunge in midwinter, and then the process starts again. Of course, this spring, the process was cut off, well, the legs were cut off from our spring market. And you can see that we started to climb up rapidly in spring, but then we had the big shelter-in-place decline and then the rebound. But one of the interesting things about the rebound is you can see houses have rebounded much, much more strongly than the condo market. The gold line on the right, you're seeing that the percentage of listings accepting offers in May for condos and co-ops was something like 16%, while it was about 27, 28% for houses. So that's a huge difference. And of the condo market, the market that has been impacted the most is our biggest condo market, which is the general South Beach, Mission Bay, Soma, Yerba Buena market. That plunged the most, and in May, it still wouldn't even be on this chart because the percentage of listings accepting offer in May in that segment was under 10%. So I think, obviously unemployment has crashed into San Francisco. I think it is hitting the tenant market most dramatically by far, and the rental housing market is really being hammered by this surge in unemployment, and tenants are indeed moving out in quantities, and rents have been dropping rapidly, much like they did after the dot-com bubble popped. We'll have to see where that goes. Migration is an extremely interesting and important issue, both in and out of the city and in and out of the Bay Area. It has been an important issue for the last couple of years, and it'll be particularly important to see where it goes from now. But anyway, going back to the condo market, I think condo buyers have a tendency to be younger. They have a tendency to be less affluent than house buyers and house owners. This is a big generalization. And so I believe they have been hit harder than house owners and house buyers. Okay, next. Okay, so this shows a year-over-year trend in the number of listings going into contract, comparing the last 12 months with the previous 12 months. So here you can see, again, of course, this is a very seasonal indicator as well. Up in spring, down in summer, spikes back up in autumn, crashes in midwinter, and then jumps rapidly in spring again. Here again, on the right side of the screen, you see in the green line that we had the big decline with shelter in place, and then the rebound. However, and by the way, so this is a week old as well, and the rebound has continued. That green line has continued to climb up toward last year's level, but we are still significantly below the level of business as measured by offers being accepted than last year. Offer acceptance activity is the most real-time measure we have of what's going on in the market because closed sales are a lagging indicator reflecting what happened 3 to 6 weeks ago. Okay, next. Okay, so this is just looking at our inventory. And again, this is in May, goes through May. We look at June, the rebound has continued, and it probably at this point is actually somewhat above where it was in 2019 at this time of year. So it's good to see not only is the buyer demand, buyer confidence jumped back in, but the sellers have jumped back in to try and meet that buyer demand. Next. Okay, so this is interesting. So San Francisco, of all the Bay Area county markets, so this is looking at all the county markets in the Bay Area based on comparing the number of listings accepting offers this year in May compared to May 2019. So for example, if we look at the far left side of the scale, Santa Cruz County, already in May, they were doing more business than they were last year. Sonoma County was doing about the same, and so forth and so on until we get down to the far right corner, San Francisco, where in May we were still 38% below what we did in May 2019. Definitely the lowest number in the Bay Area. San Francisco was hit hardest. The San Francisco market was hit hardest by shelter in place. Our shelter in place regulations have been the strictest. We live in the second most densely populated city in the country. And our market has been hit hardest, and it has rebounded slowest. So though we have seen a dramatic rebound, we are still behind the rebound seen in other counties. And in fact, some of the other, though our rebound is continued, some of the counties are soaring dramatically above the level of business of what they did last year, while San Francisco is still somewhat below, but closing that distance very quickly. There's been a lot of talk in the news about migration and the rush out of San Francisco and blah, blah, blah. It reminds me of the articles a year ago about IPO millionaires devouring San Francisco. The main point I have to make is it's too early to know exactly what's going on. You cannot make big predictions as to what the effects of a crisis will be in the middle of the crisis. In 1989, right after the earthquake, there were articles about how the marina should be bulldozed and turned into a park because it was built on fill. So anyway, I'm not saying that there aren't some demographic shifts. If there are occurring right now, they're quite small, but there are a lot of other factors in play as far as why other markets are stronger right now. And of course, a lot of it is simply the strictness of shelter in place. Next. Okay, so I talked about home listings being a lagging indicator. So this is just through May. So we had a staggering drop of closed sales in May, reflecting the staggering drop in accepted offers at the end of March and in April. The numbers in June for closed sales are going to jump up very, very dramatically, reflecting the dramatic jump in accepted offer activity that we had in May and that we are having in June. Okay, next. So this is a trend also that we're seeing around the Bay Area. So San Francisco for years has been showing unbelievable sales price to list price percentages, especially in houses, though condos have also typically been above list price on average and on median. In May, that basically fell down to 0, i.e. the median sales price was equal to the median list price. Typically, that only occurs in the lowest point of the year. As you look in the chart in January of 2018, January 2019, January 2020, that's when it dropped back to that 100% realm, reflecting the very slower market of December. Here in spring, it also fell down to 100%. Of course, most markets in the country would jump up and down for their average sales price to final list price to be 100%. But the fact of the matter is that's a big change for the city. I will be interested to see what it looks like in June. Of course, these offers, the sales closing in May, again, were a very low sales volume. And many of those sales occurred with accepted offers in April, when the marketing of the properties was extremely restricted and the buyers' ability to see the homes was extremely restricted. And so for those listings that stayed on the market, instead of getting their usual 3, 4, 8, 10, whatever offers, it was not uncommon that they received one offer, which the seller then decided to accept. Okay, next please. Okay, so house sales prices, just like sales themselves, is a lagging indicator. So you can see that in the first 4 months of the year, for most of those months, the median house sales price, monthly sales price, was above what it was in 2019, year over year. In May, it dropped down a bit. But if you look, $1,630,000 is not a crash. In fact, the median sales price for all of 2019 was 1.6 million. So it's not some staggering drop. Again, it was based on a very low number of sales, and it was based on the fact that the higher price segment crashed the most. So when the number of higher price sales drops more than other segments, that pulls down the median sales price. I did look at what the median sales price so far in June has been, only for the first few weeks, but it's over $1.9 million for houses, which is by far the highest median house sales price San Francisco has ever seen in its history. That is not necessarily a reflection of a change in fair market value. To a large degree, it's a reflection that the higher price home segment has rebounded extremely dramatically, outperforming the lower price home segments. We will not really know what's going on with these median sales prices until we have a few more months of data and the market starts to settle down into a normal or semi-normal status. But this chart is going to look very wacky in June. Okay, next. Okay, so condos, again, for the first 4 months of the year, year over year in 2020, were above the median sales prices in 2019. But in May, it dropped, and it dropped actually quite dramatically, much more dramatically than for houses. And this seems to be reflecting the greater weakness in the condo market, as well as the big drop in sales that sales offer accepted activity we had in April. I looked at the June month-to-date median sales price for condos in San Francisco, and it came in at 1.15 million, 1,150,000. So it ticked back up a little, but it is not back up to the level it was for 2019. It is not seeing the big jump that houses are seeing. And so it is just one more indicator that the condo market is not performing as strongly as the house market. Demand there is much weaker. And in fact, looking at the number of sales of condos compared to houses in June so far is looks like about 12, 13% below houses. And typically, the city sells quite a bit more condos than they do houses. So it'll be interesting to see where that's going. I know Paul ZEGER will have much more insight into what's going on in the condo and new condo market than I can really offer. Okay, next. All right, my last slide is just what the staggering change that has occurred in mortgage interest rates. This is playing a very big role in buyer demand across the country. I think I read this morning that mortgage or loan applications between mortgages and refinance are at their highest in, I don't know, 75 years or something like that, something crazy, because these rates are the lowest in history. And this makes an astounding difference in the cost of housing and the affordability of housing. And it's playing a big role in the rebound in demand that we have been seeing in the last 6 weeks. And that covers my stuff. I hope I didn't go on too long, and I hope some of that was useful. Thank you.
That was perfect, in fact, and you can see why people take these charts and squirrel them away. I'm going to go through a couple of the questions, if you don't mind, and I'm going to do it in sort of reverse order, starting with the last slide. So maybe, Genevieve, if you could just go back one slide and we'll put that one back up there. And one of the questions in regards to that was, what extent are these historically low interest rates artificially boosting the market? And is there a potential crash as a result when the rates come up? I know that's a big question, but it is an interesting one.
So interest rates are a fascinating issue. This is obviously playing a huge role, as I said, in our rebound. In many ways, low interest rates are a great thing for the housing market. But it's a good question, because if interest rates eventually go back up, the same prices that seem affordable now will start to seem much, much less affordable immediately. I don't know when interest rates will rebound. I have never seen anyone able to predict interest rate movements, with any accuracy. One of the things about, low interest rates is that before the virus even hit, debt levels on every single indicator for personal consumer debt, for corporate debt, for government debt, all-time highs. Low interest rates encourages people to take on more debt. And unfortunately, the more debt one has, the less one is able to have flexibility when a crisis like the pandemic hits. So I guess that's probably a good enough or long enough answer.
It was both. Thank you. Going up, let's say 3 slides, we have one with a lot of green arrows, and I think, Genevieve, that's the one. So here's what's interesting in the question that was asked is, what do you see as a pricing strategy moving forward? And anecdotally, what I'm told by the agents is that we have a whole bunch who are using transparent pricing and even saying so, and a whole bunch who are totally using the auction concept, and the price isn't even close to reality, and we don't seem to have anything else but those two.
Yeah, well, the pricing dynamic and strategy in San Francisco has been bizarre, really, for years. Nothing like it is seen in any other market, really. When I was an agent, I had a tendency to try and actually price my listings at what I thought was close to fair market value. But I can't argue with the fact that it is an agent's fiduciary duty to try and get their sellers the highest possible price. And there's no doubt that the auction mentality certainly seemed to bring that about often. In uncertain markets, I guess I have a default to try and, honestly price a listing at what I think is close to fair market value, but I think each agent has to have that discussion with their seller about the pros and cons, and the seller will have to make that decision on their own. Sorry for that inconclusive answer.
No, I appreciate it, but the idea is out there, and I think that's what's important. Let's go up a few slides. I think it's 3 slides, and we'll see the one in green with blue. That's the one. And the question here, which I think is interesting, is you see the last two, the slowest to recover, San Francisco and Alameda counties. These are our urban centers. Is it a coincidence that the 2 urban centers have been impacted the most and the slowest to recover? Is there something specific about our urban centers?
No, I don't believe it's a coincidence at all. And that's a great question, and I should have addressed it. It seems clear to me that urban centers are being, they were hit the most dramatically by the virus. Urban centers are the most densely populated. They were the ones that were hit hardest by unemployment because we have such a strong services and hospitality and tourism dynamic. They're all major transit points. So those transit points make the spread of the virus, or did when people actually transited, more dramatic. So San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, these are the places that have been dramatically hit. San Mateo was kind of squeezed between San Jose and San Francisco. And of course, there may be other dynamics at play as well. But I do think the urban issue is a big one. Obviously, shelter in place is going to be a big issue, especially in urban environments, until we have a real solution, a vaccine. Hopefully, we will indeed see something like that soon, so that the reason why people love cities to begin with, restaurants, culture, the excitement of the city, being in crowds, outdoor concerts, and all the rest, all the things they love most of this about the city, they cannot even enjoy right now. Right now, what they face is they go out on the sidewalk and they try and figure out how to get six feet away. So it's challenging. Good question.
Thank you. I don't know if we have a little more time, but until Mark cuts us off, let's go up one more slide. And one of the questions that was asked as a result of this one is a broad question, but do you think that there's evidence to suggest that the pandemic has fundamentally altered a decision to sell or not to sell, as opposed to the timing of it? So this slide suggests, of course, timing. There was a lot of pent-up demand, and there may have been a lot of pent-up inventory with sellers taking their property off the market or scared to put their property on the market. So we don't know if this big rebound here is just that inventory that was pent up and now released, or do you think that this has made a fundamental change, people moving away from real estate or towards real estate? Or maybe it's not that they're moving towards or away, maybe that they're just moving to a different location. Any evidence to suggest any of that yet?
Well, obviously, even before shelter in place began, a lot of our homeowners in San Francisco started to get spooked by the drama in the stock markets. And of course, many of our homeowners are very affluent people. They are people who follow stock market and financial news very carefully. And sellers started to wonder whether they should put their homes on the market. Some held off. And of course, with shelter in place, there was a huge jump of listings that were pulled off the market. And of course, many more sellers decided to hold off. And then it was only until when buyer demand obviously showed up that sellers jumped back in. I'm always reluctant to suggest that there's been a fundamental shift that occurs in human psychology and in markets based upon a crisis event. It has been suggested that this summer will be like our spring market because our spring has moved to summer. I would not expect that to be something that would continue in the future because there are a lot of factors that make the spring market so strong. And of course, typically in San Francisco, the summer market is a slower market because the kids are out of school and people are on vacation and all the rest. I think people who are people always are looking to sell for a variety of reasons. I think sellers now, those people are now seeing with the demand that that there is no reason for them to delay putting their homes on the market. And I would expect, I think we're seeing inventory is going to spike above historical levels, or the level we had in 2019. Fundamental shift, probably not. Again, there's just a lot of dynamics at play with this, with the virus and the stock market and interest rates and all the rest.
Well, I think that does it for our time. Thank you so much, Patrick. Very helpful. And I'm seeing all kinds of thank yous in the chat and in the question section. Do appreciate it very much. And I look forward to seeing more of your reports. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for you all for listening.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Patrick Gardner, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Education Events Committee. I wanted to touch real quick on something that Patrick brought up in a question that was asked by Dan as far as mortgage rates. As a mortgage professional, I can tell you that the California Association of Mortgage Professionals, the National Association of Mortgage Professionals are saying rates are going to be low for at least 2 years. So think that far out before you're talking about any crash with rates changing. There's also been some questions in the chat around this presentation being recorded. It is being recorded and it will be available on the SFAR social YouTube channel probably in the next day or so. And then slides, they may, depending on the presenter's use of them, they may be available later on. So check back with us on that. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Paul ZEGER. He's a partner at Polaris Pacific. He has over 30 years in the industry. Paul's leadership in identifying and capitalizing for sale residential development opportunities is unparalleled. Polaris Pacific, his company, is the largest West Coast new home sales and marketing brokerage, and his client relationships include the top residential development firms such as TMG Partners, Emerald Fund, Tishman Speyer, Paramount Group, Brookfield Development, Vanke, Prado, just to name a few. Paul has an MBA from the University of Virginia and a BA in economics from Colgate University. He's active in ULI, SPUR, the BAI, and is a licensed broker in both California and Arizona. Paul's going to talk to us today about new construction, condos, and more details to come. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Patrick. Pleasure to have everybody on the call today. Fabulous turnout with almost 400 people participating. I want to also thank you to Patrick Carlisle. We have known each other for a very long time. At one point, we were both part of the Pacific Union family, and we've known each other so long that we both were considered long hairs at the time and rebels. So it just shows how this is such a small market and you get to be friends with people and they stay around for many, many years. We're delighted to participate, and I'd like to start off with just a brief kind of warning that we are in the middle of this storm. We're not near the end. We're pretty much at the beginning. I think Anthony Fauci said when asked by Congress yesterday, where are we if this was a baseball game? And he said about the second inning. So I think it's important to make that case up front because I'm going to show you a lot of data and a lot of information, but it's all stuff that's coming in right now. And we used to follow, as Patrick showed, a lot of things of what were the closings last month, what were the deals that are going to escrow by month, and that information is such old news now that we've shifted very much to what happened this week, how many people are in, how many homes went pending, all the variable things that are very current and show you what happened this week as opposed to what happened in the past few months. And I think it's critical to know that because as realtors, you have to advise people on what is going to happen the next few weeks, and that information is moving around quite a bit. So I hope some of the stuff we provide today will be helpful. As Patrick Gardner said, that we are one of the largest new home marketing sales firms on the West Coast. We specialize our brokerage business in high density urban infill products. So basically high-rise condominiums or, urban infill sites that have 200-300 homes at a time. Today, we have 20 active projects, 12 of them in the Bay Area. We're busy in Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, LA, San Diego, Scottsdale, Denver, and Hawaii. And I hope most of you get our reports on those markets. And if you don't, it's something that's available. You just go to our website, you can get access to that. The reason I bring that up, in addition to boasting, is that we are using each of those 20 active real estate offices as little laboratories to tell us what's happening in each of those markets. So on a weekly basis, we're studying what's happening, we're coming back as a team, we're looking at that, we're trying to advise our clients to make decisions based on that. So I want to start off and share with you just a little bit of an overview. And if we can go to the next slide, that would be helpful. If you had to describe one word to say what's going on in our world right now, it's disruption. And I know in the tech world and even somewhat in real estate, there's been this tendency to try to disrupt the norm and to come up with a new idea that reinvents the way things are done so that you can create an opportunity for the next generation of companies. Well, we were all sitting around thinking about, when's the economy going to cycle down, which market niches are hot, which market niches are suffering, and thinking in a very localized way, when all of a sudden, next slide, please, the black swan event, no, go back. The black swan event of all black swan events occurred with this COVID-19 virus hitting the world. And when it hits the world, it doesn't only affect our local market, but it affects international buyers, international companies, layoffs, and all the things that drive our market. So this disruption became one of the biggest events I've seen in my 35 years of doing business. And we gave ourselves about 2 hours to feel sorry for what's going on and mourn the losses related to the whole disruption. And then we looked at each other at Polaris Pacific and said, okay, what do we do next? And so if you go to the next slide, you'll see the way we used to do business, which is we would have big events and invite lots of people in and share with them, create market pressure by this competition to get a new condominium product that's coming into the marketplace. And that shifted from this kind of a very social experience to the next slide. We're dealing with basically an affluent couple sitting at home on the couch looking at listings online and studying the real estate market. And for those of you who have been longstanding realtors, a big part of the business is the rapport that you can generate, the trust that you build in your client, the ability to look them in the eye and share information in a way that you become a trusted advisor. Well, that's a lot tougher when you can't see them eye to eye, and what you're doing is giving virtual tours online and then try to talk people through the process so that they get comfortable with the decision to buy. When the market turned in March, we saw everything shut down. Within 2 weeks, we had converted all 20 offices from an in-place visit to a place you visit to learn about the product to an online virtual center where we were reaching out to clients via the internet. And that has been a very, very interesting process for us. Next slide, please. As a company, Polaris Pacific and the key principles, we're not futurists, so that we are not trying to predict what's going to happen in the long term. Next slide. If you talk to those futurists, you're going to hear things like urban areas are finished, everyone's moving to the suburbs, everybody's going to telecommute, commercial real estate is finished, malls will be a thing of the past, and CBDs are over. Next. We have looked and studied all of this information, and we've really come to the conclusion this is something we really feel good about as a statement. It came out of Foreign Affairs magazine. And they basically said COVID will basically accelerate history rather than reshape it. And the reason we had this picture of Manhattan's financial district is you can see, what was the World Trade Center and now is the Freedom Tower right in the center of this picture. After 9/11, the World Trade Centers came down, everybody said no one will ever build a high rise again in downtown, Manhattan, because it's just such a target. Well, Larry Silverstein, big time developer, went in and said, don't buy it. People are going to move back. He built this wonderful monument to the Freedom Tower. It's pretty much fully occupied and doing very well. And we always kind of felt that that tower on the top was sort of a middle finger salute to those who dare to challenge capitalism in the world. Next slide, please. So what are we seeing in the market today? We're seeing a steady median price. We're seeing a steep decline in transaction volumes because, of course, any transaction closing right now would have had to, sold basically in April or May in order to be closing now. We've seen that prices have not yet fallen, but we feel that we're in this recalibration period where supply and demand are going to have to come into balance. I'm going to share with you some data on that. Community amenities, neighborhood services, and all of the things that draw people into high-rise living and urban living. As Patrick said previously, those things don't exist anymore. So the motivation for that crowd is diminished right now somewhat. But one of the redeeming factors is, unlike 2008, which is the last time we faced these kind of changes, today there really isn't a significant oversupply of inventory. And you'll see in these charts that follow, the inventory that's coming is really going to, I think, be absorbed pretty quickly in the city. Next, please. So here's what happened to the jobs market. From the end of 2008 into 2020, we saw about 400,000 jobs added in the Bay Area. And then boom, in a very brief period of time, we saw that peel off as the COVID shutdown happened and there was a massive layoffs in the Bay Area. Next, please. If you look at tech industry layoffs, you'll see that, May, June, that's when it was all happening. Airbnb, Uber, all of these companies were laying off massive numbers of people. The numbers actually were interesting because you read these big numbers, but then when you look at how many are actually at the corporate headquarters in San Francisco, it's not as dramatic a change. But it is something that is really worth noting. Next slide. Rents are generally a leading indicator of what's happening in the marketplace. So just for fun, we threw up here what's happening to rents in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and Oakland, and those are the three different lines. One is a per foot number, the other is an absolute price. And you can see, in all cases, they've tailed off. One of the largest apartment builders in San Francisco told me that you can always tell when the market shifts because they go for new leases from 1 month's free rent to 2 months free rent. That has happened just at about every property in San Francisco. And we investigated what was really happening in the rental market. And most of the owners told us that they're not seeing necessarily people not paying their rent because of COVID, but what's not happening is they're not renewing their leases. So a lot of people are letting their leases expiring and moving in with mom and dad or friends until the time comes where they can get back into their office. Next slide, please. If you look at, and this is a particularly interesting slide, median price, which Patrick showed, and I'm looking at condominiums here as opposed to all single family homes as well. You can see we're up to $1,234,000. Well, the dramatic thing you have to look at here is the distance between that red line and those black bars would represent the volume of sales activity over the last few months. And as you can see, as a result of the COVID shutdown, we've seen volume drop dramatically. That puts us in a position that it's very likely that there's downward pressure on market values. Today, in the projects that we're selling, we haven't seen dramatic drops in prices, but people who are coming out to buy a new condominium from a seller who's got a bunch of inventory, they're expecting something. And that comes in the form of maybe a small closing credit or a discount on the price somewhat. But everybody buying today says, I ought to pay less post-COVID than I did pay pre-COVID. And developers are having to adjust their market values and their asking prices as a result of that. Next slide, please. What's reassuring to me, and you'll see on the left, this is San Francisco, Silicon Valley, which we call everything south of South San Francisco, basically San Mateo and Santa Clara counties, and Oakland, Emeryville. this is the available inventory, and the dotted lines represent what we would consider an average amount of inventory. So you can see San Francisco has, you know, a very small amount of inventory relative to what we'd expect normal to be. Silicon Valley is a little higher. Oakland is very, very low. Next slide, please. We love this slide, and I'll just give a quick shout out to Miles Garber, who does all this work for us and does a great job. This is a way to represent the entire market of what's selling. At the bottom, you can see their last 5 or 6 bars there that are all black. Those are projects that will be coming soon to the market, probably next year. Some of them are getting out there very soon. But at the top, the red represents sold homes, the bar represents total inventory, and the black represents available inventory. And just by a glance here, you can see that, yes, there is a fair amount of inventory. It represents about 1,000 units that are actively on the market here. But San Francisco typically absorbs much more than that in a given year, so that we feel like this inventory will get absorbed quickly. And when it does, it'll stabilize prices. And you know, one thing that happens in our world is that the banks really control how much inventory is out there. Developers, you know, there's a secret here that I'm often share with people, which is developers, they're called developers for a reason. Give them money and they will build. So they're always trying to figure out what to do. And it's really the banks that limit when product goes and when product doesn't go. And right now, if you're going out for a construction loan, it's much tougher than it was a year ago. So the likelihood of heavy inventory coming, you know, projects starting right now and delivering in 3 years, that's going to diminish until we demonstrate the market values and the economics on all those deals make sense. So there'll be a bunch of things in the future that may be stalled out or held off. But when you look at this, it's pretty reassuring to see that, you know, there is activity going on at all of these projects, and they're all maintaining sales, you know, so that's a pretty good sign for the condominium business. Next slide, please. This is the current completion pipeline, and you can see, you know, the dotted line in the middle of the blue line running horizontal is an average amount of product being delivered in a given year, something like 700 units a year. Sorry, got to use the glasses to see that. Yeah, 780. In the next 2 years, we'll be delivering close to that average, but it's not an excessive amount. And if you go back to 2004, 2005, you'll see that in those years, in 2008, when we hit the down cycle, we had just delivered a massive amount of product to the marketplace, which exacerbated the problem. By the way, for those of you who weren't there, what we saw in the 2008, you know, Great Depression or Great Recession, we saw prices drop dramatically. They were flat for a couple of months, then they started to creep back, and within a year, we were back to or above our original pricing. Next slide, please. Just to show you what's going on in other markets around the Bay Area, in case some of you represent product outside of San Francisco, Silicon Valley had delivered a lot of product, but that is now drying up. So the future of the oversupply there is probably unlikely. Next slide. Same thing with Oakland. Oakland is really gone apartment heavy. There's not a lot of new condos coming. So our expectation is that condominiums in Oakland will start to gain value as we come out of this downturn. Next slide. So we want to walk you through what's happening in today's market. And this is kind of the fun part. Many of you know about these products. Some of you don't. So I thought I'd share. These are the big properties that are coming to market right now. This is 1 Stewart Lane, which is at the corner of Howard and Stewart Street, right on the Embarcadero. Opened literally a month before the downturn. A perfect example of how affluent people can afford to keep going even when the market is suffering, because we were successful in selling right through the downturn using virtual during the shelter in place, using virtual presentations. And I think, you know, we sold something like $40 million worth of inventory May and June, which is, you know, by our standards, a good result. Next slide, please. Mira, the Genie Gang design property built by Tishman Speyer. We like to call it the Twisty Turny Tower. This is 300 and almost 400 units, 150 of which are BMRs. There's over 200 homes in here ready to close. They just started delivering this month. So there's a lot of activity going on there. And the prices and the market rate in there ranges from, you know, something that's probably $1,400, $1,500 a foot to the top of the building, which is more like $2,200 a foot. If you're not looking for BMRs, there's 150 in this building. There's still a bunch available, and you need to qualify. You need to make between about $90,000 and $110,000 a year. You know, anybody who's in that range, have them go to that website and take a look, because it's a great location right behind the Gap and a beautiful building, and an opportunity to get something at a great value under the BMR program. Next slide. 181 Fremont, we all know about. It's really the top section of the building that is a residential tower. Beautiful views there. They've sold a little over half of the building. It's stalled out a little bit coming into this delivery of the building and the ongoing sales activity. But I think that's partly because the ownership has felt like they know their price, their value, and they're going to hold their prices steady. And they've got a fully leased building below them, so that the ownership of the J. Paul Company probably doesn't have much economic pressure to sell at today's rate versus prices that they're shooting for. Next slide. The Avery is Related's property. It's just the top section of this building. Below are apartments. They've been slow go there, but it's active now. They've adjusted some prices, and they're seeing a lot of activity. But it is one of those properties that's suffering from the fact that, you know, the market's been so quiet for the last 2 months. Next slide. Four Seasons is newly opened, and they're just getting underway. They have the beautiful Aronson building and then the tall high-rise. It is a lovely building, generally large homes, so the average price is quite high, but they're out there actively promoting now, and something to keep an eye on. Next slide. Harrison is just one Rincon. I call it one Rincon 2. The Harrison was a property that delivered right into the slowing down in the marketplace, so it's been a long process for them. They're down to a very few left, and they're holding out for the pricing, so there's an opportunity there as well. Next slide. Seraph, this is at the corner of Turk and Market. So this is in the heart of the Market Street corridor at the foot of the Tenderloin. This is going to be a dramatically beautiful building. You can see the exterior of it is so lovely. It's half hotel and half condominiums. And the unique thing about these is they're very small homes, so the pricing on these are going to be very modest. You know, I think we may even have starting prices under $500,000 in the building. So that is an opportunity for somebody who wants to live in the urban core to be right in the thick of things. In the last 2 months, that has been a very unsightly place. It's what the mayor was referring to, basically people living on the street. But they're in the midst of cleaning that up based on a commitment they made to Hastings Law School. And I think that this part of town is going to get more and more active because of the, taking the traffic off of Market Street and all of the, when the downtown area reopens, I think the vitality will come back. This won't be out there in the marketplace till probably fall or early next year, but it's going to be a very, very dramatic building, and it is contributing to the rejuvenation of Market Street, along with the Shorenstein apartment building that's a block up and the Warfield that's in between them. This is becoming a very vital part of the city. Next slide. Parcel F, which is the Heinz building. This is a hotel, office, and condominiums. And this is one of those that, I'm sure the banks are drilling Heinz right now in every way possible about valuation here, because, until you get your construction loan financed and released, these deals are just a dream. And then once the bank funds, you can start and get moving and start selling and start promoting, and it will be something that is going to add dramatically to San Francisco. I just don't know what the timing will be at this point. Next slide. There's a range of smaller buildings that are out in the marketplace that are worth checking out. As brokers, you should know about these. Many of them are south of Market, 2177 3rd and 950 Tennessee, two examples of that. Both, a few minutes walk from the Chase Center, in the center of all the activity that's going on in Mission Bay and with the new hospital. Likewise, the Crescent, which is Grosvenor's deal, and Union House, which is DM Development. Those are in established neighborhoods, the Crescent being on Nob Hill and Union House being at the corner of Union and Van Ness. And these are very upscale projects, very boutique, the kind of place that a lot of San Franciscans like to live because they're close to all of the things that make San Francisco such a desirable home. Next slide. And a couple other smaller projects that are more in the affordable price range. Maison en Pont, which is J.S. Sullivan's deal on Lombard Street, 111, which is ZNL's property on 7th, and the 36 SF, which is March Capital, located on Cesar Chavez. These are all places where, prices today are very sexy. And if you have an entry-level buyer that wants to be in the city, these are all opportunities that are out there right now and worth understanding and checking out. So I would encourage you to be familiar with that. If you go to the next slide, please, just as a wrap up, to sort of give you an overview of what we're thinking and to share with you some of the points that we think have to be taken into consideration and we're talking to our developers about. First of all, balconies and terraces, nobody used to care about them. They were just a place that, when you had a guest who smoked, you'd stick them out there, or you'd stick an old plant as in its dying moments. Now, all of a sudden, very important. Everybody wants fresh air. Everyone wants big openings and lots of recycled. Everybody wants to have that private open space that they can enjoy in the event that we face this again. Entryways and mudrooms are more prevalent in homes, and that's something that we're working with, a place to come in and dump all your stuff, clean up, and keep the cleanliness of your home separated from the outside world. The idea of more surfaces are antimicrobial. HVA systems, we've never answered so many questions about what is the HVA system in the building. People want to know what kind of filtration, what are you filtering out, how small are particles, is the air coming in recycled as it often is in apartment buildings, or is it actually fresh air coming into each home? And so those are all things that we're working with. And a touchless technology, used to be a luxury, and now just about everybody wants it. They want to walk up to the front door and have it open with a key fob. They want to go to the elevator and have the door open and take you to the floor without having to touch anything. And even your front door, sometimes we want to have a fob so you can get access very easily. By way of summary, I would say that we're early in the process. We're trying to learn everything that we can so we can share it with our developer clients and with you as the brokerage community. We see some really wonderful product coming into the marketplace. And I recall, right after the big earthquake, as I think Patrick referred to, in 2001, the big sorry, that's how much my mind slipped. In 1989, the big earthquake, everybody was like freaked out and said, no one will ever live in the marina again, and no one will ever, go into a high-rise building. And it didn't take long for people not only to be rebuilding all those properties, but now, 30 years later, they're worth 3 times as much as they were back then. So I would encourage people to be patient, to watch the market carefully, to look forward to opportunities, because whenever there's dramatic change, there's also opportunities. And we encourage you to look at those opportunities as well. But I think that if you've got clients that are interested in San Francisco and they have their jobs still, the affordability factor is so great right now because prices have leveled off or maybe slightly declined. Interest rates have continued to go down. So the monthly cost of homeownership is still wonderful. And I think that is something that everybody can benefit from. So I encourage you to understand the condominium market, share that information with your clients, and please, if we can be of any help to you, we're available.
Paul, thank you very much for the data and the insights. We are going to save questions for you until the end, just because we're going to have a question and answer period at that time. We've got one or two folks that still need to go still. So I'm going to turn this back over to Juliette Vo. Thanks, Paul.
My pleasure.
Hi, yes, thanks, Paul. That was very interesting. Accelerated versus reshape. I'm going to remember that. Hi, everyone. My name is Juliette Vo, your 2020 Education and Events Chair. I have the privilege today to welcome two superstars whom are breaking the barriers and consider themselves as the new generation in commercial real estate. They have deep roots and passion for our city, and both have served on various committees, executive directors of nonprofits, national board of directors, and our major Asian American influencer. Their most recent accolade was recognized by CoStar USA as 2020 Power Broker winners for closing the highest transaction volume in commercial real estate deals in San Francisco. Please help me welcome Sequoia Commercial Group partner Ashley Song and co-founder and managing partner Carlos Serrano Kwan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us with us here today. I know Carlos is here somewhere. I can't see his screen. But first off, okay, we're both here. Good job to all of our speakers so far. Thank you, SFAR, for having us. It's such a pleasure. And we look forward to hearing the next speaker after us, Brad Inman. So I will probably start off, I will start with the first half of the presentation, and I am in no way an economist, but I will do my best to present what we have from CoStar statistics just last week, June 19th, 2020. And then Carlos will finish it off with where the new commercial real estate world will be post-COVID era, and also where the opportunities will be. So let's jump into it. I'll keep it short and sweet. So as we all know, the tech sector drove demand for office space in San Francisco to a whole new level during the expansion cycle. We saw because we noticed the real estate prices increased drastically, and also people from out of state that are moving over here to San Francisco to work at all the tech companies. But with the coronavirus pandemic, it has interrupted some of the market's largest tenants and sent the economy quickly into recession overnight. The market rent per square feet has decreased as vacancy rates has increased. Next slide, please. Over a course of 3 years, as we can see in the slide right here, it's from 2017 to now. In 2019 Q4, the net absorption rate was in the positive, meaning that most vacant spaces were occupied and there was not enough inventory on the market. The vacancy rate stayed steady at 6%. Next. In Q1 2020, we start to see changes as vacancy rate increases and the net absorption rate is now in the negative. Next. And over here in Q2 2020 is where we see the dramatic effects of Corona, as net absorption rate was multiplied by more than 6 times from Q1. Vacancy rate also increased by over 2% pre-COVID. Next. So the sublease market was already rising prior to the coronavirus outbreak. We know because we're very deep rooted in the commercial real estate world. And now demand for the space in the market is falling. Leasing volume quickly dropped to recessionary lows. The market is saturated with co-working space because everyone thought that was where the unicorns were. But who would have known that COVID would come, which now, due to social distancing concerns, these spaces will probably be vacant for who knows how long. And on top of that, many large companies are now closely evaluating their use of physical space while monitoring their mobile workforce's productivity. So they're actually paying attention now. With occupancy rate down more than 1 million square feet in Q2, we are still optimistic that it may bounce back later this year, aided by several large tenants moving into new buildings pre-leased in the expansion period. San Francisco market has some of the largest tenants, including, as we all know, Salesforce, Facebook, and Google, who are seasoned corporations with strong balance sheets that are well positioned to survive the recession with limited losses. But of course, threats to the office market has made its appearance, and there are other companies, including one that we all probably know and we used to use pre-COVID, Uber, who are facing dire economic circumstances. Next slide, please. In addition to job losses, we could see here, a sizable shift towards remote working could have damaging effects in the office market. A fifth of the companies are planning to transition to full remote policies. 89% are planning at least partial remote work policies. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg envisions a measured rise towards 50% mobile workforce over the next 5 to 10 years. And also remote-based hiring will ramp up, while over the long term, he estimates 20 to 30% of Facebook's existing workforce could become remote. Also, Jack Dorsey's Twitter and Square announced working from home will remain an option indefinitely, but also confirmed that he plans to retain Twitter's downtown headquarters, which there's a positivity right there and optimisticness. Okay, next slide, please. And despite dissipating rent growth and elevated tenant risk, San Francisco will remain a premier market for office investment. And so let's jump into the stats for sales. Next, please. As we see here, sales volume picked up in 2019 and remained strong in 20 Q1. Let's jump to the next slide. As the market continued to attract institutional investment and several large owner users were active, asset pricing increased through 2019 in conjunction with moderate levels of rent growth. But moving forward, cap rates could rise as investors seek high returns deemed necessary to take on a greater risk. And rents could fall as landlords adjust to new economic circumstances. Sales volume, in addition to leasing, is facing a severe slowdown in post-pandemic era, as tenants and investors have largely been frozen in conjunction with the broader economy at first and are now assessing a rapidly different landscape with far more unknowns. But with every recession, there are definitely opportunities which many investors and private institutions have been waiting for so that they could capture a piece of our market and create a footprint of their own, which now leads us to Carlos's presentation on what's happening now. And most importantly, where are the opportunities?
I'm so sorry. I thought I was on mute.
Next slide. Carlos, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everyone. It's my turn. How's everyone doing? I hope you can see me. Can you guys see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. First of all, I want to thank SFAR for this opportunity to share some of my insights with my peers and my industry professionals there. I've been with SFAR for 15 years, and I've been in this city for 45 years. But one thing that I want to do is I actually want to ask you all in the audience to think about something that, an issue, a challenge as business leaders and real estate professionals, how we can together create opportunities for our clients and community in this challenging environment, because I do believe that we can and we must shape what we call, or what people have been calling, this new normal. Because if we don't proactively change policies, put in our leaderships in politics, policymakers, we're going to allow folks to determine our future in San Francisco. So before I go into what I believe, what is commercial real estate through my lens, I want you guys to think about things that we can do together to be proactive and plan ahead and shape our own new normal for the betterment of the society and the city. First of all, explain kind of what we do, Sequoia Commercial Real Estate. My primary objective is to source investment property for office and multifamily buildings with value add potential and development projects for our local and overseas investors. And we also list and lease investment property across all asset classes, for example, industrial, office, multifamily, and retail. What have we been doing during shelter in place? Boy, the last 90 days have been quite challenging. Staying at home, working, but actually quite productive. We have 18 active listings for sale and for lease. Some of them development deals, some of them leasing, some of them trophy, multifamily buildings. All 18 are all decent deals, pretty good deals to invest in, but some of them are not moving. And so it's quite a bit of a concern for our landlords and our sellers. And that's what I want to get to next. I've been spending a lot of time on a daily basis, hours upon hours, talking about commercial leases, renegotiations, deferrals, putting things back on the market, subleasing. So it's been quite a challenge for landlords and tenants. But for the most part, it's really getting the understanding of what the current environment is, what the limitations are, and it's about survival as well. So it's been really, really challenging. But at the end of the day, it's something that we can jointly do some problem solving. And we really should be that way, whether you'll be residential or commercial. Landlords and tenants are not in an adversarial position. They should be in a position where they can work things out together without the interference of government or any other entity involved. So it's really, even when I talk to attorneys that deal with this, they say, Carlos, it's best if both parties resolve the issue together. And this is the type of mindset I try to instill on both landlord and tenant as we continue this situation during our pandemic. Also, one of the opportunities that I see is that we've been successfully helping small business owners access SBA loans and acquire commercial property. And the rates are historically low, and with the outlook for their own business, being pretty positive, we've helped quite a bit of businesses prepare them for SBA loans, acquire commercial property, and therefore control their own destiny. So I wanted to shift to one of my personal interests, though, which is one of my pet peeves is seeing San Francisco filled with graffiti, filled with homelessness, filled with tents, and just dirty, plain dirty. And I'm really tired of it. And so, I talked to planning department and see how we can get some of these unused spaces activated. So for example, one of the deals that we did was to lease for a developer 33 Gulf Street, which is a 49,000 square foot building on a 1 acre lot. And I couldn't get this thing leased out for the life of me. I mean, the place was occupied by City College. It wasn't positioned for any type of office, flex, or warehouse use. So I thought, I told Ashley, I said, who could possibly use this, at least for a temporary basis, until it gets developed? And I thought about, I recall the city has a Department of Real Estate, and the mayor needs to house like 10,000 beds in the next 3 years or something like that. I wasn't sure what the number was, but I contacted the Department of Homelessness, and lo and behold, we entered a lease for 3 years to build a temporary transitional homeless housing center there. And everybody's happy. The city's happy, developers happy, neighbors are happy. And at that site, our developer partner will be building 25 stories with approximately 518 residential units in this area called the Hub. And the Hub includes 18 parcels for dense, high density development. It's where the planning department is where Mission and Van Ness intersect, Golf, that little area there, kind of like a triangular area. But where the old Honda dealership was. So you'll see all these high rises popping up in the area. And I'm hoping that I can help to reactivate, at least temporarily, until this arduous 5-year, 10-year process of entitlement is completed. So that's kind of what I've been working on recently. Some of the key indicators that I've been tracking are corporate layoffs, subleases hitting the market, rent collections, and delinquency rates. So these are some of the areas of concern that I have, that I'm tracking them, but also helping to problem solve those owners that are having issues with making repayments, and bringing in perhaps bridge loans, perhaps helping them liquidate some of their investments, and finding other investments for my investors as well. So what's happening now? As I mentioned before, commercial landlords and tenants are experiencing hardships through forced and voluntary store closings. Retailers are struggling with slow foot traffic, declining consumer sentiment, lost wages, and restrained consumer spending activity.
Carlos?
Yes?
Carlos, that's a excellent
We're done.
thought. Yes, so
Okay.
we need
No
to
problem.
move on for this
Sure.
moment. So I want to introduce Nina Deschamps, our 2019 SFAR president. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Ashley and Carlos, for that informative update. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Brad Inman. Brad is an award-winning journalist and publisher and is the founder and owner of Inman. I've had the pleasure of being a part of the Inman community for many years, and I've always been impressed with the level of organization and sometimes the technology risks that Brad and his team are willing to take to stay in front of and in touch with everyone in the Inman community. Recently, Brad and his team pulled off Inman Connect in a matter of months in a completely virtual way. The risk in new technology tools is something that Brad and his team have never shied away from. Countless new products and companies have been launched at Inman conferences. If you've been to an Inman conference, you know that Brad and his team place a high value on the relationships and building community that is willing to try new things and push the industry forward. Today, Brad's going to provide us with some guidance on how to stay in front of clients, stay relevant and empowered through this massive time of transition. Please welcome Brad Inman. I think you're muted.
There we
Brad.
go.
There you go.
I'm off on mute. How are you all doing? Great to be here. I really, I'm glad you're late because I learned a lot and I really appreciate it. But I will tell you a funny story. Back in the 1980s in San Francisco, the Bay Area Council had their annual dinner. And George Shultz, who was the Secretary of State then, was the keynote speaker at their annual event. And George Shultz was supposed to speak at 9:20 p.m. at the latest, and he was supposed to speak for 35 minutes. And they were late, and they didn't introduce him until 2 minutes before the scheduled end of his speech. And George Shultz got up in front of the entire Bay Area Council and said, "It's great to be here. Good night." And he walked off the stage. I just thought I'd share that story. We need to help the associations learn how to be on time. But for all of you that hung in there, this was really useful for me. I learned a lot. So thank you very much. You know, I'm not sure what I can add. You folks are in the trenches in the Bay Area. I am in the Bay Area, which has been absolutely fantastic. If you could think of a better place to be in terms of smart people, safe people, activism, and all the other things that go on in the Bay Area, I'm really grateful that I am here. I was in the Bay Area for almost 30 years. I took off, but I still own property here, and I love the Bay. I'm not sure what I can add, but I was thinking maybe what I could talk about, the three things I'm seeing in the industry right now that's allowing agents to survive in a tough time. And I think it's really important we don't put too much spin on these things. You know, we've had 3 shoes to drop: COVID, the economy, and now we've had incredible unrest in response to, you know, horrible injustice in our country and many others. And it's hard to bear. I mean, this is going to be remembered for generations. And I always tell people, show up, be present, be active, be there for your family, your clients, and others, because you will get a report card. Now, some of us can't do everything we'd want, but we will get a report card for this time. So make sure these indelible memories are ones that you're proud of in terms of, be present. And I think that kind of leads me to the three things that I think are so important right now. One is your emotional intelligence. You got to really deliver for your family, for your clients, and your community. You got to be incredibly empathetic and understanding, because right now that's what people want, and that's what they expect from their local professional realtor. And that kind of informs all of our marketing and everything that we should be doing right now. It doesn't mean you don't get back to business, but you do it with grace and dignity, because you're going to be judged about how you behave during this time. The second thing, in a confusing market, and I have real estate all over, and I always check in with my realtor how things are doing, is market intelligence. As I always say, you need to have your zip code tattooed on your forehead or your ass. You need to understand that zip code better than anybody. I can go on to Zillow and do Zestimates. I can pull down market reports, and God forbid I can download a 100-point PowerPoint. But the way I get the most deep-seated intelligence and nuance is from a local realtor who has that zip code, like Oakland, where I lived for 30 years, 94618 on their forehead. And that's a realtor that knows what's going on with every building, every street, with owners, sellers, history, and everything that's changing house by house. Because right now, consumers are really confused. Buyers are confused, sellers are confused. And now more than ever, you need that intelligence. And that's what the realtor is there for. And those that are really using this time to study and understand are going to find that they're going to be most successful. And the third is a high technology IQ. This is what I call the digital spring. It's been transformative. I've been preaching the digital transactions for 20 years, and who would have thought it takes a pandemic to finally make it happen? And it's amazing. I went to 100 cities, talked to 30,000 realtors in 2 months on Zoom Airlines. The market cap of Zoom is greater than all the airlines in the world put together. And it has made it possible for us to connect in new and meaningful ways that we never thought could happen before. And I know we all want to touch, and we all want to be close, and we all want to hug maybe, but what I found is the sincerity and the intimacy and the presence of digital is amazing. I did, during this last 3 months, I did 60 podcasts. I interviewed 60 what are called leaders of the industry. And to be honest, I didn't know these people. I've been in the business so many decades, and they have too, but we knew each other in passing. And in passing is not sincere. It's not present. It's, oh, hi, John, how are you doing? Really quick in the green room, passing in the hallway. Think about you and your clients picking up, get in the car, you're in traffic, you're moving. You're not sitting face to face where you have to actually pay attention. If you don't pay attention, if I drift off and look at my phone right now while I'm talking, that doesn't work. Think of meetings where people get up, they go to the bathroom, they take a call, they get on their, so that's not sincere contact. This is a huge opportunity to understand connection. I was in the ebook business for many years, and I had someone in the ebook world call me in the book publishing business. She goes, oh, I've had to sit on the sidelines. I can't travel to see all my agents and all my publishers. I said, why? Why haven't you? Why haven't you used this incredible technology to reach out? So the technology IQ is so important. Now, I also say this is a great time to do an inventory of your technology and throw out the crap that doesn't work. And I'll give you a personal example. I got a Roomba as a gift. I think it's called a Roomba or Roomba. It's an automated digital vacuum cleaner. And I decided during COVID that I would turn it on. And it was talking at me. It was obnoxious. It was loud. And you know what? It doesn't do nearly as good a job as this. This is an amazing technology. You don't need a Roomba. And you know what I did with my Roomba? I was in Palm Springs and I threw it in my swimming pool. And the pool guy says, should I get it out? And I go, no, leave it in there. It's a symbol of Brad Inman's determination to begin to start using the technology that works and get rid of this stuff. I think all of us have used this time to reflect, to slow down, to rethink things. And honest to God, we don't need some of this technology, which is a distraction. Because now more than ever, we need to think. We need to communicate. We need to read. And we need to kind of slow it down from that rat race of digital. Now, some of the things quickly that I've seen, and I'm not going to keep you long. I do have 42 slides, though, so if they can get that ready, I'm going to run through those real quick. Let me talk about what I see happening in the industry. It seems to me that many of the franchises are showing real leadership, whether it's KW, whether it's Compass, whether it's Realogy Brands, whether it's Remax, they all seem to step up. And also all the CEOs of these big companies got humbled. They're working in their kitchens too. They're not in the big corner office showing off all their graduate degrees and their trophies and their awards. They're just like you and me. They're in the kitchen. They're in the living room. And it's about time they came down to an industry that has always, in my opinion, been bottom up. It's the everyday realtor. And you know what the everyday realtor does in this industry? Inman News wouldn't exist without it. San Francisco Association of Realtors would not exist without it. Zillow would not have a $13 billion valuation. All of the money that supports all of these enterprises comes from the hardworking everyday realtor. And I've seen the pyramid switch, where the reality is the survival of the realtor is all should be all these, but should be our obsession. So, but I am seeing more leadership. I'm seeing broker owners do something they used to never do. Not enough. They're communicating with their agents, some every single day. And they're doing it because it's easier now. It's more efficient because of Zoom and because of digital technology. I'm seeing technology companies innovating at a pace that I've never thought imaginable. There's stories just today about the digital notary. We all believe in that in California. We're so ahead of the rest of the country, but all of these people that are involved in a transaction are so unnecessary if it's not done digitally. So we're seeing some incredible stuff. Now, I do not like to gloss over the truth. There's been many people here that have talked about the market that are smarter than I, and I would leave it to them. But the one thing that we know is going on is this is a market where there's movement, whether it's people doubling up, whether it's people selling because they want to move, whether it's because buyers want to find new locations, whether it's the ordinary situation that we've seen where people need to move for whatever reason. We know for a fact that a lot of relationships in this isolation have been destroyed. And so there's going to be more divorces, there's going to be more separations, and one household is going to need two houses. And a lot of, I have so many friends that I always check at it, it's the happy meter on their relationship. And it just always in real estate, there's motion and movement, but in a changing market, there's more. And what does that mean? That means realtors that are really seeing the opportunities, are engaged, are present, are exercising those 3 IQs. There's transactions. But it's not a market. If you're new to real estate, I'm sorry. I'm sorry some of the pain you're going to feel here. But when a market's growing, it's just chop, 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 easy, easy, put it in the frying pan, make money, get paid a commission. In a changing market, you have to be adaptive, and you have to work harder, and you have to be more alert, and you have to be more attentive, and you have to use this opportunity, this idle time, I believe, to learn. I can't tell you how much I've learned being in these calls where I get these kind of conversations and listening when meetings are late. I've learned more in 3 months than I learned in 10 years in real estate. And part of the beauty of that is talking to everyday realtors. And what I've learned is this is an incredibly beautiful, colorful industry, which I've always felt, but I've never been more, the thought has never been more affirmed than now. And there's some things we have to worry about, but I'll leave that to someone else. But I am going to share something that that is about the Bay Area that I've told to people around the country. And, living in the Bay Area this time of year, we all know the fog is a big deal, right? And I was thinking about the fog, something about it coming and leaving made me start thinking about COVID. And I'll leave you with this, and if we have time for questions, great. If not, I totally get it. But there's a poem that Carl Sandburg once wrote. He said, "The fog comes in on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent haunches and then moves on." This tiny poem got me thinking about the fog in San Francisco and COVID-19. Almost every summer day, as you all know, the fog comes through the Golden Gate Bridge and defines our lives here. It affects our work, our play, our mood, and even our daily decisions. Then in the fall, its season is over and it leaves. And I leave you with this message, gang. As we just begin to see through the fog of all these tragic events, we must realize that this too has an ending. Not knowing when exactly is daunting, and not yet understanding the full consequences is scary. But there is solace in knowing that this torment, not its memories, will too pass through our lives. And I'll leave you with that, gang. So I'm grateful that you had me. And I got to tell you, I love Nina. And I've always loved the San Francisco Association of Realtors. You are progressive. You're out there. You're in it. You got to figure out how to get a meeting on time. And by the way, I went 13 and a half minutes and I had 15. So we have time for a question. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Brad. And we actually are going to leave off on that note. I think that was a very high note to end this meeting on. We appreciate you joining us, and we ensure we are on time in the future. Thank you for that. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark Dickhow, who's going to wrap us up.
And thank you, Nina, and thank you, Brad. Brad, I just want to say it's great to see you. It's been too long since I've seen you. And I have kept my Roomba so that my dogs can chase it around the house. So for those people that are thinking about getting rid of it. Anyway, I just want to once again thank all of our speakers for great presentations today. I want to thank our moderators, Nina and Dan. I especially want to thank our Education and Events Committee and chairs, Juliet Bowe and Patrick Gardner. With that, I'm going to say thank you guys for attending. Stay safe and healthy. Have a great rest of the week. We will see you again at one of these events very, very soon. Thank you.